Network Automation Nerds podcast. Hello and welcome to Network Automation Nerds podcast, a podcast about network automation, network engineering, Python, and other interesting technology topics. I'm your host, Eric Shou. Today on the show, we'll continue to talk to Andy Champagne, SVP and CTO at Akamai Labs. Andy, again, has been in the industry since the early 1990s. The early work focused on network engineering and architecture for regional ISPs. Since joining Akamai in the 2000s, Andy has held a variety of engineering and leadership roles. In part two of this interview with Andy, we talk more about leadership styles and principles, as well as our opinions about the future of connectivity and technology directions. I hope you enjoy this conversation.
Yeah, I think it is a big jump, but I would follow with management. It is just like software, which is an abstraction layer. And you have to be comfortable with your abstraction layer. And so when you get to director, senior director, vice president, all of a sudden, like the critical thing is, who are the team leads?
Yeah.
How do you get to the point where you have when you are a team lead, you intimately know everybody in your group and you have kind of that personal connection with them. When you are a director, you need to have that same relationship with your managers. And you really want to make sure that like your managers are culturally like that everybody's getting the same message about the company. Like you don't want to create like 2 or 3 versions of the company. You want to make everybody's got to be going in the same direction with kind of the same vision for where it's going to go and what you're building from a technology stack. And candidly, you got to meet with people a lot, right? And like you got to do a lot of one-on-ones. And the other thing is like I love like town hall Q&A meetings, which is and it's one of the reasons I like podcasts. It's like there's nothing easier for me than I'm going to sit down and we're going to talk about whatever questions for an hour. And you ask me the tough ones. Ask me why raises are only X% instead of Y%. Like, and I'm going to give you the best answer I can. You're not always going to like it, and just be authentic and just allow people access. You can't. I'm a little bit of an introvert, right? I'll say that, which is like it is my general tendency is I want to be left to work alone. However, when I find myself with a group of people who love technology and are passionate about where we're going, I really feel differently. And it's like, hey, let's talk about it. What are you having for problems with your project? Help me to understand why you're behind in this, march towards production that you're going down. And how can I help with that? And where do we go? Do we need more resources? So, you've got to be one of those people where I think you're energized about the technology. And I think it's okay if you're kind of more on the introvert side, but you have to be really passionate about tech, and you have to be able to translate that to being passionate about talking with people. And, especially today, Akamai prior to COVID was mostly in person. Now we're mostly remote and kind of hybrid. And we've stayed in that model. And, the communication is still as important, if not more, because you have to get in front of people regularly. So, today I have a luxury where my direct team is small, but like the matrix team that I work out with in the company is just, we got 10,000 people in the company. So it's a lot of folks. And, I spend so much of my day is just chatting with folks on, our internal chat stuff. Email is probably the worst mechanism, right? At this point I'm just saying for like communication. And, a lot of it is that like, hey, I'm just chatting with somebody while I'm doing a walk with an AirPod and just, you've got to be really willing to put the effort in around communication.
Yeah, that's kind of interesting because like all of us we've just coming out, we're still in, but we're kind of gradually coming out of the pandemic. And one of the struggle, at least I'm out of Seattle, and one of the struggle is, Microsoft and Amazon keep on postponing coming back to the office, and people are having different opinions about it. So how do you, what's your stand on, coming back to the office? And like you said, the communication remote is, as much as effort you could put in, is still not the same as in person, but as employees, or as managers too, like they treasure these freedom that and we've proven that it could work to a certain degree.
So I'm going to give you like a joke answer first, but also a kind of serious one. And then I'll
Yeah,
talk a little bit about what we're doing at Akamai. So my joke,
sure.
but yet serious answer is, as a semi introvert person, I wanted to build the internet so that I didn't have to leave the house. Right. And it's like, we're there. Okay.
You're solving your own problem.
Yeah, exactly. Right. We're here. And,
Yeah.
and obviously the COVID is still going on,
Yeah.
and is still serious. So now at Akamai, we've embraced this, which is we're just fully hybrid.
Hmm.
So there, we went through a very long process, and like the vast majority of Akamai's roles are flex, which means you can go into the office if you want, you can work
Hmm.
from home if you want, and it's kind of, it's all good, and you're all the same. And I like that clarity. I personally hate and am very uncomfortable with not knowing. So if I had to deal with kind of a looming back to the office date that keeps getting kicked down the road, that
Yeah.
would stink. I would kind of just be like, can you just tell us, are we going to go remote or are we going to be in the office? I think both modalities are fine.
Hmm.
I will say I still live, I haven't moved during the pandemic or anything. So I still have like access to the Akamai office. And I do really enjoy, it's really special when you go in, right? Because you're seeing people in person and interacting with them. But additionally, like just for a technology roles, there is so much that you can do from home, and there's so much accessibility. So I think that remote is incredibly viable, and Akamai's really kind of doubled down on that. We've got just great support all the way from Tom, our CEO, and into our HR department. So and it's generally been a really welcome change because folks want to have some more flexibility in their lives, and commutes and stuff. It's just that seems crazy to set yourself into that.
Yeah, it's funny that you mentioned now it's an event, right? Like when you go into the office, it's almost like, hey, Tom, Andy, or haven't
Yeah.
seen you in so long. It's like it's so special that you now have it and the people treasure it. So yeah, yeah. I mean, I see the change as well. You start grouping all the meetings and all the team building events into 2 or 3 days, and those become your hub. The office essentially become a hub or a switch, I guess. Um, of your interactions and kind of the days that you plan around them, and then the rest of the time you just have it for yourself. I like that hybrid model. Is just I hope more companies can adapt to it, but at the same time I realize not all job functions, like you said, we're lucky in the technology realm that so much could be done remotely.
100%. And it is a very it is something that is very narrow to technology, right? Generally, is
Yeah.
that it's got that, and especially because I think in technology, everybody knows the tools around how to do this. And the reality is, you've probably been working. You would go to your desk at your office and work remote from there, right? You're SSHing into something, you're on video conferencing, so it's just a question. But again, the team stuff is still super important. So as a team lead or kind of early manager,
Yeah.
you still got to think about how do you do team events that are going to be fun, and just to be honest, also are like COVID safe. So doing like outdoor events or doing hikes or team like whatever it is, picnics, stuff that is going to make everybody feel comfortable, I think is still like really important.
Yeah, I'll be the first to say that I still wear masks inside, and if not for me, it's for other team members as well. Because I have 2 kids at home, and if you have kids, like you do, Andy, like like they just kind of bring all the germs around. Like, you're essentially living with all of their classmates, where they've been to because they just don't they take less care about wearing masks and hygienes and so on. So I do wear when I go into the office or interact with other people. I still wear a mask. So, but I am clearly in the minority now. So, making everybody comfortable is really key, and I appreciate that thought.
Yeah, no, and I find myself using it if I'm in and I've kind of come up with my own rules just to be transparent. Like, it's something that I
Sure.
think about too, and it's something where I've kind of come up with my own rules of the road. Like, if I'm in a all day meeting with 8 people, I'm comfortable saying, all right, I'm not going to wear a mask. Right. But if I'm
Hmm.
in, some like more presentation type thing in a larger room with like 100 people, I run the
Yeah.
mathematical odds on that in my head. I go, yeah, I'm going to wear a mask. Right. And, I think that I think that's fine. And I support, kind of whatever people want to do. But I also think, a big part of my job is to make sure that everybody feels comfortable. Right. And that,
Right.
I'm doing whatever I can to accommodate that. And, again, and I'm big on, hey, if we're going to do an event, let's try to do something outside. Let's try to do something that's fun where everybody can just kind of relax. And it's, again, it's about figuring out how do you make people comfortable to really get the best out of them and get them to bring their best selves to work.
Yeah, I think that's a great example of something relevant and something that illustrates your leadership style, right? Like when you talk about being authentic, when you talk about enabling other people to kind of be the best version of themselves, that I think that's such a great example of illustrating as in an example format of your style and what you believe in. So thank you for sharing that.
Cool. Awesome.
Yeah, so I noticed that you follow Jeffrey Moore, the author of the classic Crossing the Chasm, on your LinkedIn. You don't follow much people, but I kind of stalked you on LinkedIn a little bit. But you specifically follow him. So well, first of all, can you tell people what the book is about, or if you're a fan of the book? And I just love to hear your thoughts on that. I read the book just recently, so.
Cool. So I probably shouldn't have accepted your LinkedIn request because you've been stalking me. No, so I think I follow like 1,000. Oh, so I think I'm connected with 1,000 people on LinkedIn, but I don't follow that many topics. And first of all, Jeffrey Moore was a board member at Akamai for maybe 12 years. So so this is like an awesome topic. So I got to know Jeffrey from his time as a board member, and obviously, just an awesome perspective on kind of futurist and where technology is going. And I can talk about some examples there. Crossing the Chasm really is, I think, what I would say is his seminal work. And, we had the luxury of having Jeffrey present at a bunch of our like management offsites and events because he was, on our board at the time and just had a ton of like super applicable knowledge to the company. Crossing the Chasm is about, really when a company is getting going, velocity and getting critical mass to make it through kind of these sets of great filters that are out there, right? These things that just prevent companies from making it to the next level. And, I think as you look at startups, like, there's these statistics that, so many very high percentage of startups fail and they do. Right.
Yeah.
And it's
and
really
those are
rough.
Only the ones you heard of.
Exactly. There's all these ones that quietly die out and, they never make it past 4 people or 10 people. And, Jeffrey's book, which I would encourage everybody to read. And I love this kind of, it is incredibly important to keep an eye on this kind of step back abstraction, right? Which is like, let's take a step or two back and let's look at what is causing some companies to make it and some companies to not make it. And company makes it sound business. It's really about technology, right? Mm-hmm. Which is like, what are the technology components that catch on and succeed? And what are the ones that don't? And, so I think it's an awesome read. I think it's great you just read it. I probably last read it about 6-7 years ago, but he does a really good job of running through some calculus on what causes companies to not cross that chasm and make it to the other side. They basically just fall through and at some point cease to exist or end up, being sold off.
Yeah, I mean, the lucky ones made it to the first phase, right? Like the early adopters, they love them, but making that between the early adopters to the I think he called them early majority. So having that, it's really just this gap that you have to overcome. And many companies, if you're lucky enough to make it to that first phase, the beachheads that what he talked about, but you still fail because of all these challenges. And the gaps are not equal. Going from early stage to early adopters, it's little, but the gap is just crazily big. And I agree with you. I think it's good that and for me, I read the revision edition, so he actually included a lot of the, like you said, this is a classic. So he included examples from Cisco. I think he replaced like Sun Micro or something that's just a bit outdated, but he included later examples, and I really enjoyed that read. Like you said, it's just an abstraction, right? It's from a high level and looking at from like a broad stroke. And it helps when you could pull yourself out of that details. So, and I didn't know he was a board member. So you must have met him a few times and have a beer or two.
Yeah. And I'll be honest. Yes. And I have like my standard LinkedIn policy is I don't I don't connect. I don't have a connection request with you unless I've met you in
Hmm.
person or virtually, right? So
Right.
yeah, and Jeff, which is, I guess I'm kind of old school with that, but it's whatever. It's worked thus far. But yeah, and Jeffrey, I think one of the examples, and this is way back, we're probably in late 2000s, 2008, 2009. And, we're
Hmm.
talking about like how Akamai services evolve. And one of the
Yeah.
interesting things to us was, what do devices look like? Right,
Mm.
because like the makeup of devices, and this is a couple years after the iPhone came out, right? So like we're
Yeah.
rolling around with iPhones with like 16 gigs of storage, right? Like, and I got the good one, and it's got 16 gigs.
Yeah.
Well, you laugh now, but I remember this. And Jeffrey with this whole deck that he went through, he's like, "Hey guys, like just when you're thinking about how your services are going to work, these end devices, you're going to have like a terabyte in your pocket." And everybody's like, "A terabyte? No way! You're
It's gonna burn a
crazy."
hole in my pants
Yeah,
because
it's like, what do I
it's
have, a
gonna overheat,
car
right?
behind? Yeah, it's like, how are
Yeah.
you gonna get a terabyte into that? And this is where he's dead on, because now,
Yeah.
it's like I got the 512 gig iPhone, and it's the normal one up. Like and so
Right.
it is the progression of technology and the ability to take a little bit of a step back and say, well, this is what it is today. And you've got your iPhone with 16 gigs. But if we go from 2008 to 2018, you're probably at 256, and you go, and it's just, and that has huge ramifications for somebody like Akamai, because we're thinking about, okay, what kind of storage could we use on the user's device to maybe load things in advance for software updates, et cetera. So
Yeah.
super
Yeah.
interesting. And he was a tremendous influence on the company, and just awesome service on our board.
Yeah, it's interesting how like things, yes, revolve fast, but also at the same time, you're kind of taking examples from other, like PC, for example. How they still kept up with the Moore's law, but it's more distributed, but it's ways that you accommodate that growth. And I look forward to the day where my watch could cache movies and have a camera. And I mean, I look at my phone, my watch, I'm like, and one day they're going to be the same. And I look forward to the day where I don't have to carry my phone around, really.
It's interesting. And it'll be very interesting. The amount of computing power on watches today is uncanny, right? I have a
Yeah.
Garmin, like more of like the Marine Quadix or whatever it is, like watch, and like the
Yeah.
process, it's amazing. Like it's got a full map GPS thing on. Like I've got GPS maps and zooming in, and it's amazing. I think it's got 250, like 64 gig or 256 gig of storage. So the
Yeah.
processing capability is amazing. And as you said, it's changed. It's no longer about single core performance, but
Right.
it's about architectures like ARM has made so much progress, right? And RISC versus CISC, and kind of the different instruction sets. It's going to be really interesting to say, well, oh my gosh, where is it going to be in 10 years?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I love to hear what your thoughts are. What do you think the next big thing in networking is? What do you think of the connectivity might look like in the future? Love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, that's a great question. First of all, I think the interesting thing that's happened, and I'm speaking mostly to the U.S. market here. I mean,
Yeah.
because the world is evolving at different rates and points, but like high speed gigabit access is kind of like a done thing. Like if you have cable today,
Yeah.
typically you can get high speed digital access now. Uh, that's all. So basically, what I'm trying to say is like wireline, like fixed line connectivity, like seems to be kind of solved. And I think we've
Hmm.
got to figure out, why do people need more than a gig? Because it's not even really clear most people need a gig. So I think we got to figure that out. Like what's the compelling application? But I think the part that I'm most excited about is RF, radio, wireless connectivity.
Oh,
And I
okay.
think, yeah, and just if you look at what's being done with like Starlink, it is
Yes.
absolutely amazing. It is
Hmm.
absolutely amazing. And the potential for that, today you've got this Starlink dish, which is compact and cool and is, nicely packaged and works great. But
Yeah.
like, what's that going to look like in 10 years? Is it just going to
Yeah.
be in my phone? And obviously, I understand all the RF attenuation problems with 10 gigahertz and line of sight and phased array antennas. I get all that. But the technology is going to keep moving forward. So you're kind of moving to a model where you could truly be untethered, right? And we've
Hmm.
got Apple in the iPhone 14 with this SOS feature that's using satellites.
Yes. Yes.
Very interesting. So this notion of RF radio connectivity kind of is just very interesting. And I'm an Ethernet guy. Like my laptop is plugged into Ethernet. I have an access point that I can see. I still plug in because of the latency benefits and the best, better quality of service overall. But RF has made scary improvements, and where that's going to go in 10 years, I'll be interested. I'll probably like bookmark this video and watch it in 10 years and see if I was. I wonder how many views it'll have. But I think the capability for ground and space-based connectivity could, really change the scope of access as it is. And Starlink's done a ton there, and others are coming soon and working on it. And it's also very interesting to Akamai, right? Because as we think about what is the edge of the network, boy, that's changing all the time, right? I mean, are we going to be launching satellites too? Are we going to have CDN satellites up there?
CDN satellites.
It's possible.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's very exciting. I mean, you brought up so many good points, and first of all, it's back to analog, right? RF and all of that. And I remember, like, you need to have a direct line of sight for wireless, or you need to have like a different return path for beaming up. But yeah, I think it's very exciting. I think the only, I guess, grudge I would have with Starlink is they're still figuring out, right? Like special Ethernet adapter from your satellite, and then that costs $40, or roaming capabilities, even though they have service, but you can't transfer ownership, so you can't put it on an RV and go and stuff like that. But I think if you move back a little bit and just say this is a broader trend, and this is how connectivity would evolve into, then like what the great one says, right? You want to go where the puck is going versus where it has been. So that's a great way to kind of look at it.
I'll make one more comment on that, which is I'm a Starlink customer. I have the stupid Ethernet dongle. I had to wait 3 months for it to show up, right? It was back ordered.
Yes.
But this is version 1.
Yes,
and the analogous example that I'll go back to, like my first job was in digital prepress, right? So like digitally preparing files for printing, like literally printing on paper. And we used to use software that required a dongle, meaning it was like a USB or serial thing you had to plug in, and the software did an encrypted check to make sure you had the dongle before it would run. Now I have Photoshop. Now I have Photoshop and Lightroom on my phone. So let's give it 5 or 10 years, and I'm sure they're going to work through the Ethernet adapter issues and the form factor. And again, you might not need a CPE. I mean, yes, there's challenges there, but that whole landscape will change. I agree. User friendliness is only going to go up over time with these technologies. Right. And I think, with Starlink, everybody who's using it now, it's just the early days. I mean, you're in the Wild West of this just getting figured out, but the technology is amazing. And, and there's also, of course, 5G. And the relevance that could have. Now, the technology implications for that are different. It's somewhat about urban settings. It's about denser coverage. But, again, I mean, that actually is very analogous, because if you think about, satellite-based systems don't work well typically in urban areas because of, skyscrapers attenuating signals, et cetera. But maybe 5G has a role there. So wireless connectivity is going to be interesting. It's going to be hard for folks like me to give up their Ethernet cables, but it might happen at some point in the future.
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking forward to that, really. I mean, 14, as you were saying, doesn't take a physical SIM card anymore, right? So that's just kind of these baby steps and graduating from one step to another. And I would imagine that your bounds will be a little different, in the future. Maybe it's like, I don't know, like a physical location, or maybe it's urban area extension. So it's kind of diverging through. One thing that you mentioned kind of triggered my thoughts, and it's kind of a abstract, not very well formed. So I'm curious your thinking on that. So it seems like we're gearing more and more, especially in these edge cases, gearing toward more and more dual standard or even multiple standards of regulations. Like, for example, China is going through their own thing, US is moving ahead, and EU might have different standards and so on. What are some of the implications of that, in your opinion, on networking, connectivity, and so on?
Yeah, so my personal opinion, right, which is really the only one that I think you can state on topics like this, is like the internet does not want to be fractured, right? The internet does
No.
not want to have different walled gardens depending upon what country you're in. I'm kind of a subscriber to the information wants to be free. And,
Yes.
I think that I think it's generally challenging because I think it makes the technology implementations specific to a geography. Now I can understand that as far as privacy regulations, et cetera, that all I can
Yeah.
understand.
Yeah.
But when it comes to kind of the filtering approach, I think that it can be challenging. And obviously, Akamai, we respect local laws everywhere we operate, et cetera. But my personal view is that it's a challenging ecosystem today because the political discussion and environment has really kind of led its way into technology policy. And as a technology guy, that I kind of wish it wasn't that way all the time.
Yeah, I'm with you. So I'm from Taiwan. My sister does majority of her business in China, and I've been in situations where we're integrating, different segments within the companies. And I think you're absolutely right. I mean, I'm in the same camp as you to believe that technology information wants to be free, and we need to build on each other's shoulders. And technologies should be enablers for us. And the best way to do that really is through open source, is through sharing and openly be authentic, like you said. Just be yourself, and because everybody else is taken, right? So
It's very true.
yeah,
And open source, I mean, has been such an amazing force, right? And I mean,
yeah,
just again back in the time machine, if you go back to the late 90s, early mid 90s, late 90s, like open source was there, but like it was mostly like a Windows game, like Windows
yeah,
NT, DOS,
yeah.
Novell, and just how the ecosystem of open source, I mean, to the notion that Microsoft has a cloud platform that runs Linux is
Yes,
still
yes.
amazing to me,
And
right?
Sonic.
And yeah, and it is so, open source has been just such a formative experience for the internet, and it's just been absolutely amazing for me as well. I mean, so much of my time is whether it's playing with Arduinos or Raspberry Pis, and obviously the ecosystem. So it's not just open source software. Now we're talking about open source hardware as well, which is kind of a
Yeah.
cool area as well. Yeah.
For sure, for sure. Yeah, I remember. I mean, you brought back so much memories now. It's like I remember, we were working with predominantly in the local ISP. We were working with Windows or Solaris, and there's this new thing called Linux that comes out and runs on x86. And I'm compiling the kernel. I'm like, this is just so much work. I'd rather just give somebody a bucket of money to do what I wanted to do. But look where it is now, and I'm a true believer in that. I mean, I think the first thing I think in my book, it's just the open source community. It's just so great, right? Like without Python, without a lot of the Linux, OS, I just don't know where I would be professionally or personally with these projects. And like you said, open source hardware, 3D printing, all of these are just maturing, and I would love to see where they're going to go next.
Yeah, I fully agree, and I think I'll also like you're making me feel a little old, but that's okay. But I mean, I was a FreeBSD guy to start with,
Oh,
right? So
okay, nice,
yeah,
nice.
so I think
That little devil with the fork. Yeah.
yep, the daemon, right? So
Yeah, yeah, the
you know, I
daemon.
I, I think that learning, and I'm going to say it this generically, learning Unix was
Mm.
the most important thing that I did, right? And that
Wow, yeah.
because I mean it just opened up, and whether it's System 5 or whether it's Linux or whatever you're talking about, I started on FreeBSD. Today I'm a Linux guy, but it was just all that experience is so translatable, right?
Yeah.
Which is it's just been amazing what's happened, and to that point. Open source, my electronics nerd background, like we talked about with vacuum tubes and desoldering stuff. I love the open source hardware is awesome because you have a level of understanding and control that just wasn't there before. I'm playing around with I'm in a GPS NTP server that I want to run downstairs, so I have on net Stratum 1 server, and the fact that I can do that with open hardware today is just
Yeah.
fantastic. And of course, it's plugged into wired Ethernet as well. So
Yes, yes, of course. Why else? But so what technology excites you the most? I think we cover so much, right? Like you talk about open hardware, you talk about these 5Gs or satellite connections. Out of all of these, can you pinpoint one or two that you really want to focus on? Like, say, if we want to go where the buck is going, where would I spend the next, I don't know, 2 months reading if I wanted to like start my own startup? Where should I focus on?
Yeah. So, and again, I'm giving you my personal answer,
Of course,
which
of course.
is, the blockchain technology is amazing. And we
Okay.
have seen a major flame out of
Yeah.
the Web3 space, right? Like,
Right.
and I know there's a ton of good work going on there, but like the whole NFT thing, like, I mean, there's just been a huge flame out of Web3.
Yeah.
However, would say that the initial promise of, or like the technology promise of blockchain
Yeah.
is still there.
Hmm.
And I'm super excited about what the kind of combinatorial solve of blockchain plus other things that
Yeah.
could bring us, whether it's a solution to social networking, right?
Yeah.
And, a better social network, or what comes next there. And it probably doesn't even look like a social network, but what it is. So that one, from like an application software perspective, that's probably where I would go. On the networking side,
Yeah.
I said it earlier, but I think it's about RF, which is like, understanding like what can connectivity look like, and mesh connectivity is very interesting. And
Hmm.
there's some really interesting new products and work around kind of not always on mesh connectivity, still used for like durable message delivery. So those are areas that I love. So I know I'm giving you kind of a super vague answer, but I think blockchain from a software stack perspective is extremely exciting for me. And I think on a network side, it's about, taking what was once the realm of wired from a quality of service and performance perspective and moving it into wireless that is not location dependent. You don't have to be within 100 feet of your access point to be on, 5 gigahertz, et cetera, and just really changing the landscape there. So I know those are really wide angle answers. Um, Other things that I think are super interesting, AI is making just scary progress forward,
Yeah.
and that's
Yeah.
that's an area I'm not an expert in. I am working to learn more about it, but
Yeah.
the capabilities there are just amazing.
Yeah, no, I mean, I resonate with all three of what you talked about. I think um, the blockchain and the Web3 really, it's kind of like they're going through a winter right now, but they're going to come out, and whatever is left is going to be better than what was before. I mean, the Ethereum just went through the merge, and not just the merge, just not any merge, it's the merge.
Yeah.
And then that in itself is probably yeah, it saves, like, switching from like mining to like stakeholders. But the thing that's really good is that it's going to enable like sharding in the future, where the process time is going to be a lot faster. So imagine, your credit card transaction time, right, versus like today where you need to transfer your coins. That's going to, the sooner that we could bring that time down into your credit card transaction, the sooner the more people will start adapting and use those. And yeah, so I think that was a huge step to enable, like, sorry, excuse me, sharding and all of that, Wi-Fi, RF, as you mentioned, and also AI, right? Like, I've seen these AI driven AI written articles, AI, drawing paintings, and like, even some of the demos, like I wasn't privy to be one of the beta users, but I've seen videos where people just say, hey, give me a little 5-year-old girl walking on clouds, having having a golden door or whatever, and then the AI just generate that picture, and it's beautiful. It's like as if somebody had painted it over 10 days. It's just crazy how advanced those has come to, and how far we have come to.
Yeah, and I've seen the same thing. And there's a site now which is open. I think it's called Crayon.ai or something like that. And
Okay.
I've done the same thing where it's like you can just put in like a barn on a hill in the fall,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
you'll get out like, the AI crunches for like 30 seconds, and you get
Real
out
time.
five or six different pictures come back, which is
Right.
what it thinks that should look like. And
Right.
they're all slightly disturbing. Like they have this like ethereal quality to them, but it's
Yeah.
also like, damn, did that just do that? Like
Yeah.
it's very applied. And so I think it's going to be interesting it's interesting and scary where that
Yeah.
could go. But it's certainly a very interesting area of work, research, and now applied actual sites you can go to.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. I mean, those pictures, like you said, like it's kind of it's kind of scary and kind of unnerving and kind of this airy feel. But at the same time, it's like, yeah, I'll take it. Like, I mean, it doesn't need to be a masterpiece, but they just look awesome with the amount of time it took versus the quality. I think that's a good trade off.
Yep. Oh, it's amazing. Yeah. No, it's amazing in a scary way, right? Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. So Andy, I mean, I feel like we could take another hour, chat about the connectivity and an hour, but we're coming up on an hour. I want to thank you again for being here. Like I said, I think a person of your caliber really enhances our learning. Just learning through your path and what stands out for you. I think that's really important. So I want to thank you again for being here.
Yeah, well, hey, I super appreciate it. And I think if I could leave with anything, and I'm not like, an inspirational speaker, but it's one, you've got to be authentic, right? So
Yeah.
just be yourself and look for how you can use yourself to kind of motivate people and to, bring out the best in people. And the other one, where he started is you got to find some time for play. And, hopefully your day-to-day job enables you to have that. I think that's the long-term secret. I mean, when I look at my personal things that I want to do, like there's so much of it is just technology driven, my personal to-do list of like fun time stuff.
Yeah.
And I encourage people to have that because it makes your day-to-day so much more interesting if you're able to bring in an intersection of what you do professionally, what you want to do personally. And then it's not really about like work-life balance anymore, right? It's about like, hey, how do I just do more of what I want to do?
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, that's what I typically ask people. Well, I jumped the gun a little bit, but like, any call to action. So you would say, be authentic,
Yep.
find time to play, because that's what would make your a day that goes by that you don't feel like you're working because you're just playing.
Yep. And like, for example, like the last hour, I mean, this is fun for me, right? So, find out the things that are fun and, try to incorporate, try to find a role and a position where you're able to capitalize on. And obviously there's going to be real work. I mean, I got an afternoon of spreadsheets and Google Slides in front of me, but I think it's also important to incorporate some of, I mean, we have a lot of that, right? But also figure out how to incorporate some of that fun in, because I think that's what motivates you to get up. Right. And that's what motivates you to keep doing it and put in the time and put in the effort because you're moving the state of the art as it relates to what you care about forward.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you again for being here. Your video looks great. I need to see if the StreamYard uses like some of that Akamai CDN. That's why it looks so great. But
Thank you. Yeah.
Thanks again for being here.
Awesome. Thank you very much.
Thank you for listening to Network Automation Nerds podcast. Find us on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and all the other major podcast platforms. Until next time, bye-bye.